Good morning, 8th graders, and welcome to your first day of taking notes. Today we are going to review integers. This stuff may seem familiar to you, but it's very important that we refresh ourselves on this so that we can get the semester off to the right start. So today we're going to review the rules that surround integers. We're going to look at subtraction, we're going to look at addition, we're going to look at division, and we're going to look at multiplication and what happens when you have a positive and negative integer, or both positive or both negative in all of those scenarios. So just to start off, I wanted to remind you to go into your attendance tab and mark the Google form so that we know that you are here and you are completing your work. Additionally, tomorrow we will be checking your notes, so make sure when we're done here you fill out all of the rest of the examples so that we know that you have done your work while you're at home. So let's start with subtraction. The subtracting rules are going to be in the top left corner of your foldable. What you're seeing on my screen is the inside of your foldable. The first thing we are going to want to do is we are going to want to keep the first number. So what that looks like is when you see these two examples, you are going to keep this -3, you're going to keep this +5 how they are. Next thing you want to do is you want to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. So this subtraction sign becomes addition, and this subtraction sign becomes addition. The next thing you want to do, same thing, you want to change the sign on the second number, change. What that's going to look like depends on the sign that's already there. So on the top, you're going to change this into a -2. But on the bottom, on this second example, you're going to change it into a +2. Okay? Fourth rule, after all of that is done, is you then want to use the adding rule. Or rules, I should say. So before we do the examples, let's move on and fill out the addition rules so that you know what you need to do to complete the subtracting examples. So let's go all the way over here and let's fill this out together. It's pretty straightforward. If you have a positive and a positive, that is going to stay positive. In other words, you're going to keep the sign. Same thing goes when you have a negative and a negative. A negative and a negative results in a negative. You are going to keep the sign, or you could say it's going to stay the same. All right? But what happens when you have different signs? Okay, what happens then? What happens is you are going to want to keep the sign that is in line with the larger integer. So we will do an example of that, but first let's look at these rules. See how this positive is bigger than this negative? If the positive is bigger than the negative or larger than the negative, then you're going to keep it as a positive. Alternatively, if the negative integer is larger than the positive integer, you are going to keep the negative. So underneath these notes, you want to say that you are going to keep the sign of the larger integer. Okay? So now that we know what these addition rules are, we can now complete the subtracting rules. So let's try out the second example for you so that you know what you need to do, and then you can try out the first on your own. So if we have this +5, we're keeping it as a +5. We're switching the sign to a positive. And then we are also switching the sign of the second number, which was -2, so now it is +2. We have +5 plus +2. Now we come over here and we look at the adding rules. If we have a positive and a positive, we know that it's going to result in a positive. Now, the last thing you need to do is 5 plus 2. And we know now that 5 plus 2 is 7. So positive 5 plus positive 2 equals positive 7. So once we're done with this worksheet, I want you to try out negative 3 plus negative 2 and see what you can come up with. For addition, these two have the same signs. So I'm not going to do those with you because they're pretty straightforward, and I think you are more than capable of completing these on your own. However, I will review the different signs with you. So we've got one right here that is negative 5 plus positive 3. Negative 5 plus positive 3. Okay, is 5 or 3 larger? We know that 5 is larger. Even though it's negative, 5 is still larger than 3. Because the 5 is negative, we know that our outcome is going to be negative, okay? So we have negative 5 plus positive 3. If you were in my room, you could look at the number line. So let's write one out really quick. We have negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, and so on and so forth. We want to add 3, so we want to move to the right on the number line. So when we move to the right 3, 1, 2, 3, we end up with negative 2. So negative 5 plus negative 3, you are going to end up with a negative because the 5 is larger, and it's going to be negative 2. All right. So after we're done with the notes again, I would like to see you do the first 2 examples on your own so that tomorrow when I look at your notes, they look great. Let's get into the rules of division. So when you are dividing 2 positives, it's sort of like how when you're adding 2 positives, things stay the same. So 2 positives equals, dividing 2 positives makes your outcome positive. So it makes positive. But what happens when you have 2 negatives in your dividing? It does not stay the same. It does not stay negative. When you have a negative divided by a negative, those negatives cancel out and you end up with it making a negative number, making a positive number. Lastly, we have number 3, rule 3, dividing a negative and a positive number. So if you have a negative divided by a positive, or you have a positive divided by a negative, this is going to result in a negative number. When you go over to multiplication, you're going to find that things are pretty similar to dividing. So when you multiply a positive times a positive, that is going to make a positive. When you multiply a negative times a negative, those negatives cancel out just like they do when you're dividing, and it still makes a positive. But what happens when you're multiplying a negative and a positive? When you multiply a negative times a positive, the negative does not cancel out and it remains negative. So your outcome of a negative times a positive makes a negative. Okay? So over on the dividing rules, I am going to leave the examples for you that have the same terms, have the same signs. So these 2 are positive, and it makes a positive. I would like to see that this is completed tomorrow when you get to class. These 2 are negative. They also make a positive. But let's try out this example. A negative 6 plus a positive 3, or not plus, divided by, a negative 6 divided by a positive 3. So we know that a negative and a positive makes a negative, because that is what it says in rule 3 over here. Now all we need to do is 6 divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So negative 6 divided by positive 3 equals negative 2. I'm going to leave the same thing for you on the multiplication side. I'm going to leave the one that is positive for you to do and the other one that is positive for you to do. I will do the one that has a negative and a positive with you. So let me just draw a little bigger of an equal sign. We are dealing with positive 2 multiplied by negative 2. When you have a positive and a negative multiplied, it results in a negative. Now all you have to do is multiply 2 by 2, which is 4. So remember, negatives cancel each other out. So that is going to be relevant here, and that is going to be relevant here. So try the remaining examples and be ready to show your teacher. I'm Miss Whitaker, by the way, so be ready to show me or your teacher these notes tomorrow. And please reach out to us if you have any questions about any of these problems, or you have questions about any of the notes or rules. Let us know what you need and we'll be happy to help.